Hello, everybody. So for my project of choice, I am choosing the restoration of the Wai Watershed, as well as the Wai Canal. And it's going to be a landscape ecology approach to urban canal restoration. So I'm primarily going to be covering restoration efforts, a little bit of the ecological complexity, and then, of course, community impact of the watershed. And this is Nicholas Goujon. So I should put my screen full. Okay. So the Ala Wai watershed is situated in Honolulu, which is on the island of Oahu. And first, I should explain that on the island of Oahu, there are several watersheds going across the island. So it's very mountainous. And because of that, there's rain shadow effects, and there's areas on the island which are wetter and drier. So there's an image here on the left, which is the Ala Wai watershed. It's a pretty large landscape. And you can see that it covers all of the Honolulu area, as well as the Alawai Canal towards the bottom, and that's right next to Honolulu. So this serves as a major drainage and flood management system. You can imagine all of the runoff coming from the upper watershed when it rains. It all trickles down towards the ocean, and it gets caught in all of this urbanization, as well as the Alawai Canal primarily. And historically, the area of Honolulu and Waikiki was dense in wetland habitat. So it's a pretty wetter spot of the island. And because of that, there's a lot of runoff and rain. So there's been historical channelization and modifications for stormwater control, and this all has altered the natural hydrology of the whole landscape system. Some of the current challenges are sediment accumulation. So all the soil coming from the top of the watershed, when there's not dense vegetation to catch all of that, it increases in soil runoff and results in more sedimentation in the Alawai Canal and the urbanization area in general. Of course, there's concerns with water quality too, water quality degradation. So lots of pollutants that go into the water system from nearby farms, pesticide leaching, for example, and then just garbage and pollution in general. And then, of course, there's the habitat loss from all of this urbanization within the landscape. So it's very dense in houses, buildings, and it's just a lot of rights of way areas. So there's some dual challenges arising from intense urbanization and then the natural ecosystem disruption as well. So some rationale for the restoration, a little bit of the project overview. We covered pollution, the ecological concerns, the loss of native habitats, and then just the diminished biodiversity in general. So all this urbanization is pretty much took out a lot of the natural and endemic vegetation that used to be there, and then they replaced it with roads, and that's leads to a lot of biodiversity loss. Some of the human dimensions have been increased flood risks. So there has been situations in the past actually where there's been long periods of rainfall and flash flood warnings. And then the Alawai would actually flood, and since it's so heavily polluted, that actually results in health concerns. So present day, no one's allowed to swim in the Alawai due to its heavy pollution. It's literally standing, even without flood, is a health concern just from being there. And this is all of the runoff that is coming from that surrounding watershed and due to the heavy pollution that is a cause from it. So lots of public health concerns. So some project scope and collaboration. So there's been a lot of measures combining engineering. So people going in and trying to optimize the canal using channel redesign. And then there's been ecological restoration too around the canal. So planting native vegetation, hoping to create more buffer zones and a greater chance of some of that runoff water to be caught by natural vegetation. And then by doing so, it's led to habitat recovery as well. So there's a lot of people involved in this. It's a multi-stakeholder collaboration, and this is among government agencies, just the general community, and then research institutions like the University of Hawaii, for example. So a little bit of the heterogeneity. So we're talking about some natural elements. It's an aquatic habitat. So there is fish in it right now, although a lot of the native species that used to live in the area no longer are present. So yeah, native riparian vegetation. And then there was once a lot of biodiversity here when it was a wetland habitat that no longer is there. And you can see all this pollution and the urbanization. And this is the Waikiki area, and this is the Alawai. And it also drains directly into the ocean. So this is coming from the upper watershed. It's draining all the way into the canal, which eventually leads to the ocean. And due to its pollution, that it's causes a lot of issues for the coral reefs in that area too, because with the sedimentation, when there's large periods of rainfall, it overflows and goes directly into the ocean. And it can actually suffocate the coral because of all of that dirt and pollution that's going directly into our oceans. So some of the urban influences, so more rights of way, as I mentioned before, more water going in. You can imagine all the stormwater networks that are necessary to pretty much keep all of these residences up and going. And yeah, and it's also a public safety concern just from being present there, let alone it's an eyesore. Uh, yeah, no one likes the Alawai. So some of the restoration tools and on-the-ground interventions. GIS remote sensing, as we learned in some previous lectures. So there's been a lot of development with that. So people are using it to map land cover and the changes of that land cover, and then identifying degradation hotspots, so areas of greater concern than others. Some of the hydrological modeling, so they can simulate water flow and they can better predict flood scenarios in hopes of trying to best optimize the canal and the watershed in general. Some of the field methods that they do, people go out, they take water quality sampling, they just do general vegetation surveys, so looking for invasive species. Uh, and then, yeah. So some of the restoration actions, again, they're trying to better manage the stormwater control system in Waikiki and Honolulu. So dredging, trying to reconfigure the canal, some of the ecological interventions that people are doing, like I said before. So reintroducing native vegetation, and then they're just trying to establish some buffer zones or areas that could catch more of that water. The objectives, of course, to improve water quality by both reducing sediments and pollutants from the watershed all the way from the upper watershed going all the way down. This will hopefully mitigate flood risk and better enhance public safety because a less polluted canal is healthier for our oceans and everybody in general. There'll be more recreational opportunities. There's cultural and aesthetic values of the waterway itself, especially the Alawai watershed, the upper watershed. And then the vision, trying to, achieve an outcome where ecological restoration also boosts community resilience and quality of life. I'm also going to mention the Genki Alawai project. So this is an ongoing project that uh, the organization is hoping to restore the Alawai. So bring it to, what it once was. And by doing this, there's throwing in Genki balls, which are essentially, uh, like a soil ball with like natural bacteria that over time can help break down some of the sludge and garbage in the alawai, and pretty much help it to restore itself over time. So this is one of the many organizations that's hoping to make a difference in the restoration of the alawai. So I have an interview today with Maxwell Bendez. He's an environmental health specialist, and he currently works for the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. I wasn't sure the best way to play this out, so I'm just going to play it here. It's about 10 minutes long, and then, yeah, so just give it a listen. Hello, Max. I want to thank you for taking the time to interview with me today. Could you please share a little bit about your background and what you currently do for the state of Hawaii?
Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. My name is Max Bendis. I've been living and working in Hawaii for nearly 10 years now. I initially moved here for my master's program at Manoa, where I studied sustainable agriculture
Oops.
in the tropical plant and soil science department. Since then, I've worked in a bunch of different industries, including nurseries, landscaping, as well as the conservation sector. And currently, I work for the pesticides branch for the state government and the Hawaii Department of Agriculture as an education specialist. So I do consultations on pesticide safety and compliance with local laws. I do education and training, like workshops and classes for pesticide users. And I also serve as an expert on pesticide impacts on environmental health when it comes to the state making choices and changes to their policies related to pesticide substances.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your background, and I appreciate all the work that you do for conservation. It sounds like you have a great knowledge base on, pesticides and conservation in general. So I'm doing a project on the Alawai watersheds as well as the Alawai Canal. So my first question for you is, what do you think are the biggest risks to the watershed health? And what might be some recommendations that you would give the general public to try to safeguard our ecosystems?
Oh, I mean, if we're talking about the biggest risk to watershed health, that's very hard to classify because there are so many different negative impacts to our watersheds all across the state. Specifically here for this part of town, feeding down into the Alawai, there have been a lot of issues that have been caused by development when it comes to the water flow coming down from the mountains in through town. That's one of the reasons why the Alawai Canal exists in the first place. It's also one of the reasons why the Alawai is kind of gross. There have been plans in the past to expand the construction of a lot of these water features, but those plans were rejected because they would have had a significant environmental impact to the upstream areas of the watershed, specifically some of the areas in the backs of valleys. Um, if we're talking about threats to the watershed, to kind of cycle back on that initial question, I think I think that the major issues are with managing people's impact in the watershed. It's not very easy to get, trash and other types of, macro pollutants into the watershed from there. But we have lots and lots of microplastics that are all over everywhere on our island. And we also have lower stream issues with leaching and runoff, not just of pesticides and agricultural sites, but also for fertilizers. Those fertilizers that they get into the water stream, they go down into the oceans, they cause algal blooms, which is the process of eutrophication. Um, Sorry, what was the second part of your question? I started yapping really hard.
No, that's great. Thank you for the information. Just going off from that, I guess in general, do you think it's a lack of information where people aren't aware of when they use pesticides and potential runoff, or do you think it's something else?
So most of the pesticide usage, in my experience, is not happening. It's not being done by, private citizens in their backyards. A lot of the pesticide usage in the state is done through commercial entities. I do think that there is a lack of education, and there is a lack of adhering to best practices among certain industries here in the state. I don't want to name names, but landscaping. I do think that we as a department can do a lot more to provide training and educational opportunities. And I have tried to do that myself through through a workshop with UH Extension and other education projects that I'm working on with them. But we can only reach the people who are willing to show up at our courses. So it becomes very difficult to teach and train people who are not available to be taught or trained. I do think that, pesticides, while they are inherently dangerous, if you use them according to the label restrictions, they become less dangerous. And I think that if everybody used pesticides properly, we would see less negative impacts on our environment from those types of dangerous chemicals.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. Um, So I guess another question I have is there's been a lot of restoration efforts going into the Alawai Canal. Like for example, throwing Genki balls
Yep.
in there.
I see those guys on my bike ride every weekend.
Yeah, so that's great to see that. Now, in your opinion, do you think that's hopeful? Do you think that we'll be able to restore the canal, or do you think it's more as a band-aid because we need to tackle the upper watersheds first? Or what's your opinion on it, considering you live in Honolulu?
Uh, yes, I do live in Honolulu. I also live within a few blocks of the Alawai, so I am there very often. I am a fan of the Genki Ball project. I am optimistic about its ability to engage the community in a cleanup effort and to teach the importance of environmental health. I do not think that there is enough of a capacity that Genki balls can provide to actually clean the Alawai. It's been a long time since I've actually looked at any of these scientific articles around Genki balls, but my understanding and my remembrance of those articles basically comes out to yes, they work, but you need a ton of them to have any type of measurable impact. So I love the Genki Ball project as a community engagement tool. I am skeptical about its actual impact on the water quality of the Alawai. I think that if we want to talk about water quality, obviously we need to go upstream. Um, but at the same time, there are other things that I think the state could be doing to improve water quality. But a lot of that comes down to regulations because that's really the state's tool when it comes to protecting the environment. And that is slow to enact. And also, just because you have regulations in place, that doesn't mean people are going to follow them. So it's definitely not an easy question that has a simple answer. I think it is going to happen on multiple fronts. So I like the Genki Ball idea. I've also seen some chatter about like floating islands because plants have a capacity to rehabilitate and clean water essentially. But again, those are all kind of band-aids, you know. I think that to clean up the Alawai, as much as I want to see it happen, it sounds very, very difficult. I think it's going to cost a lot of money, and I think it's also going to take a community-driven effort to maybe change some of the ways that we utilize our water resources in order to keep the Alawai clean into the future.
That makes total sense. Thank you for sharing your opinion.
Yes, it is just an opinion. I would need to go back and review the science to actually state whether or not those things are going to work properly. But like I said, I'm optimistic and I love the community engagement part of that project. Yes, thank you. Agreed. Well, that's great. That's great, Max. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today, especially around the Alawai watersheds and the Alawai Canal. Your expertise is appreciated, and thank you for all of your hard work in the pesticide branch in Hawaii. Yeah, of course, brother. I hope I was able to meet your expectations, and I hope what I had to say is helpful for whoever has to listen. All right. Have a good day. Mahalo. All right, lastly, here are my references. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. Hope you all have a good day.